Welcome back, folks, to our top 50 board games. Today we're looking at numbers 40 through 31. As I mentioned in my last video, this year at Sidetracks I've had the opportunity to introduce a lot of people to a lot of new games, and a lot of games that I used to play, or maybe I played a few times and then put them on the shelf. And so a few of the games you notice on this list are going to be ones that didn't make my top 50 last year, but I've sort of grown to love them, and I've really enjoyed getting them back off the shelf and learning them again. Number 40 is one of the games that I pull off the shelf, usually first or second in the top couple games, that when there's somebody new that walks in the door at Sidetracks and maybe they're a little intimidated by the game library and they're like, I have no idea where to start. This is one of the handful of games that I'll pull off, and this is where we'll start. And that game's called Mountain Goats. And this is a super simple game. There are different tracks that you're trying to get your mountain goats to the top of the mountain. And when they get to the top of the mountain, they get to eat grass. And that grass has different point values. And so there's a track for the number 5, a 6, a 7, an 8, a 9, and a 10. And all you're doing on your turn is rolling the dice and then using those in combination to add up to a particular number. So let's say I rolled 3 5s. I could move my number 5 goat up 1 space up the mountain, or I could move it 3 space and then take the other 2 5s, add them together, and move my 10 goat up 1, or I could just move my number 5 goat up 3 spaces, right? And so there's just not a lot of decision making, but it's a great game for kids, even little kids. All you have to be able to do is add. If you can add 2 numbers together, to get the maximum of 10, then you can play this game. And so it's actually super fun, as simple as it is. It's got a great table presence. The little goats are cool, and it's very colorful. And so it's a really great introductory game, and it's new to my list. In the past, it didn't sort of raised to that level just because it's such a small little game, but I've enjoyed showing it to so many people, and so many people have enjoyed playing it this year that it's now in my top 50. That's Mountain Goats. My number 39 game is probably in the top 5 of my wife's favorite games, if you asked her. I don't know that you could get her to do a top 50, but you might be able to get her to do a top 5 or a top 10. And this game is World's Fair 1893. First of all, this is one of the prettiest games we have. The board is shaped like a Ferris wheel that was shown at the World's Fair in Chicago. But each of the cards in this game has like flavor text from a historical event or item that was displayed at the World's Fair. So it's a beautiful game. It's a really cool game if you're into history. If you, in between turns, you could sit there and kind of read the cards. Super cool. But in this game, you're basically trying to put out different people to influence different areas of the World's Fair, to have your supporters go out and have influence in these different sectors. So there's electricity and transportation, fine arts, automobile or transportation, agriculture, manufacturing, different sectors. So you're picking up cards in order to put your supporters out to have influence in this area. It's kind of an area control thing. But at the same time, you're trying to get the cards that are going to score you points. And there's a set collection element to it. And it's not a very hard game. It's just pretty easy to learn. The reason this game didn't make my top 50 before, and I still kind of feel like I feel like there's still a little bit of a first player advantage in this game. The player that goes first a lot of times ends up with an extra turn at the end. And maybe the first and second players sometimes both end up with an extra turn. And there is a mitigation for that in the setup of the game, but I'm not sure that it adequately compensates for the advantage of the first player. And so I was hung up on that for a really long time, that this game's broken because it's got such a big first player advantage. I've kind of come backed off of that a little bit. I still think there's a slight advantage, and I think the game might be better if there was a rule that said everybody gets the same number of turns. But anyway, I'm willing to look over that at this point, because it's a really good game. It's really fun, and just a great table presence. One of the prettiest games you're going to play. That's World Fair 1893. My number 38 is another game that's been on my shelf for a really long time, and Grady and I played it maybe 2 or 3 times, just sort of experimenting. Once every couple of years we'll pull it off and give it a shot. But it's the kind of game that you need to play it a few times in pretty quick succession, just so it stays in your mind, and so you can sort of start to wrap your head around it. And this year, my buddy Andrew, who is a former artillery guy in the Army. He's a history teacher with me. He likes history-themed games, and so when he comes by the shop, we pull off Memoir 44. And I've really come to appreciate this game. It's a super cool, light war game. A lot of times, war games are super heavy, and they're taking hours, and the rule books are huge. This one's not. It's pretty simple. It's got a really cool board. It does have a little setup involved. There's a book that gives you different scenarios. And our favorite way to play it, and the way it's recommended in the book, is one of us we'll pick a scenario. One of us will play as the Germans, and the other will play as the Allies. And then so we'll play through. Maybe takes 20 to 30 minutes to play a game, and then we'll switch, and the other person will play the Germans and the other person will play the Allies, and then you add those 2 scores together. Because one of the things that we've found in just the handful of times that we've played it this year is that some of the scenarios are a little unbalanced. So like the first scenario is Pegasus Bridge. That particular scenario, the Allies are pretty much, seems like they're going to win every single time. So if you're the Allies, you're probably going to win, right? But if you play it on both sides and then you add the scores together, that's a way to even it out, and you can kind of make an even match out of it. Everybody gets to play both sides of the thing. So again, we've only played this a handful of times. We've explored a few different scenarios, but the more I play it, the more I like it. This game starts out pretty easy with some basic scenarios where you just have infantry. And then it ramps up where you get infantry and artillery, and then you get tanks, and there's different terrain features that change how many dice you get to roll and stuff, but it's pretty simple. And the other thing that's cool about this game is your actions are based on card play, and you have a left, a center, and a right flank. And sometimes, based on the cards you get, you may want to be able to send your infantry forward on the right flank, but if you don't have a card that allows you to do that, and so it kind of mirrors the fog of war a little bit. You can't always do everything you want to do. You got to have some cards that allow you to do that. And if you don't have that capability right now, you may need to pivot and change your strategy and work with what you've got to work with. So really cool game, and I'm looking forward to getting this back to the table even more. I think the more I play it, the higher this board game will get on my list. That's Memoir 44. Number 37 on my list is pretty much where it was last year. It's within 2 or 3 spots of where it was last year. And this is the first game in the trekking series of games on my list. And despite the fact that I'm a history teacher, trekking through history is actually my 3rd favorite of the 3 trekking games. This one is very different than the other 2. And so you'll be hearing about the other 2 later on as we go through the list. But in trekking through history, essentially each player has their own time machine. And you're going back to significant historical events throughout history. And you're trying to create a trip, a journey. But you always have to be moving forward in time. So in your time machine, you may go back to 300 BC, and then you're going to gradually gather cards and events that you visit that's going to bring you closer to the present day. And at some point, there may not be any cards that you can get that are going to get you closer to today. And so you have to close down that particular journey, set it to the side. That'll score points at the end of the game. and then you start up a new one. And so you go way back in time again and you start working your way forward. And so I like that about this game, because you have the choice. Am I going to the longer the journey is, the more points you're going to get at the end of the game. But like so many of these games, and I love the games that do this, you have a choice. Am I going to try to score short-term points, and you have a card like a tableau where you're getting coins that give you short-term points, or am I going to try to stretch out the journey for the long-term points in the end? Great game, trekking through history. My number 36 game is similar to Dice Town. It's a game that was super high on my list because I played it a lot with my kids, and it's dropped a good bit. It's dropped 21 spots to number 36 this year. And this is a game that's designed by the same guy who designed Magic the Gathering, Richard Garfield. And for whatever reason, you don't hear much about this game, but it's a really fantastic game, and that game is called Treasure Hunter. As I was talking previously in my last video about Medieval Academy, card drafting is one of my favorite mechanisms, and this game has card drafting as well. One of the cool things about this game, it's got kind of an Indiana Jones type theme to it, and there are 3 sections of the board. There's like the mountain, snow, Nordic section, there's the jungle section, and then there's the lava underworld section. And you're competing in each of those 3 sections of the board. And you're getting cards that are color coded to match those different sections, and you're sending adventurers into those areas of the board. And whoever has the most adventurers, you're adding the numbers of the guys together. Whoever has the maximum, the highest number, is going to get some type of treasure from that area. And whoever has the lowest number is going to get some kind of treasure from that area. So it's really cool to try to figure out, as you're doing the card drafting and you're passing these cards around and you're seeing what's there and what's been taken already, you start to get an idea of what other people are doing. And you're like, am I going for the high or am I going for the low? And sometimes you could be going for the low and somebody will stick you with the card at the last minute and you end up in the middle. And so if the player across the table from me has 3 red, right, and I have 5 red, and then somebody else has 20 red, I'm in the middle, I get nothing. So you either want to be high or you want to be low. You don't want to be the guy in the middle. And so this is a really fun game. It's got some pretty cool player interaction. It's very simple, not too hard, good family weight game. It's just, for whatever reason, we haven't gotten it to the table as much this year as we have in the past, but Treasure Hunter, really fun. All right, my number 35 on the list has also dropped a little bit, about 10 or 15 spaces since last year. And my kids will probably be a little disappointed that this game has dropped, because particularly my older boys, they love this game. And actually, they taught it to some of their friends when we opened up Sidetracks. It's one of the first games they taught to people, and their buddies loved it too. And so maybe it's me getting older. I don't enjoy the confrontation as much as the young guys do, but Smash Up is still a great game. In Smash Up, you take 2 decks of cards with different factions. So you may have sharks and zombies, or steampunks and ninjas, or fairies and sumo wrestlers, whatever. The fun of it is, a lot of times you get these crazy different factions, and we've got a bunch because we have a bunch of expansions for this game, and you smash them up, you shuffle them together, and that's your team. And so each turn you get to play one of your minions out onto the board, and you get to play an action. And then you can combo certain things, you know, because each card has some special thing that you do. And so the action might let you play another minion or play another action. And so it's like boom, boom, boom. Or I'm going to attack this other player and knock them out, right? And so there are different bases on the board, and you're trying to control those bases. So it's interesting because it's area control, but it's done with cards. And there aren't a lot of other games that I've seen that do that. But Smash Up's super fun. The only downside to it is, to me, and this is why it's dropped a bit on my list, it's got a very narrow window for player count. You can't really play Smash Up with 2 players because it doesn't make sense. I just beat up on you and you beat up on me, and it's not really fun. 3 players is great. 4 players is okay. If you get more than 4 players, forget it. It's just too long. The game takes too long. And what happens is I'll take my turn, and then I got to sit and wait for everybody else. And I'm twiddling my thumbs. There's nothing I can do while I wait for everybody else to take their turn. And there's not as much strategy because everything after I take my turn, everything's out of my control. And so people could be beating the heck out of me, and there's just nothing I can do about it. I just got to sit there and take it. So this game works great for 3 or 4 players, but I don't play it with more than 4. Even 4, I don't play it with 4 that often. It's usually 3. 3 is great. But because it's got such a narrow window of applicability for the players, I don't play it as much as I used to. But Smash Up's still a great game. All right, number 34 on my list, I don't think I've actually played this year. And so it was not in my top 50 previously. So how it's in my top 50 now, when it wasn't last year, even though I haven't played it, it's probably not very logical. And maybe it's a nostalgia thing, and maybe it's just because I want to play this game so much. But I love Bootleggers. Bootleggers, I mentioned before that I'm not as big a fan of confrontation. I just said that when I talked about Smash Up. But for whatever reason, Bootleggers is awesome. And it has tons of confrontation because you're playing as gangsters during Prohibition. So think Al Capone, right? And in this game, you're going after each other. You're trying to steal other people's moonshine, and you're shooting them down with your thugs and stuff. But I don't know, I still love it because you know that going into the game, that it's basically going to be beating the crap out of each other, right? But this game is so cool because you each have your own stills out in the woods, and you're rolling dice to see how much whiskey you produce. But then you're sending your thugs into the speakeasies to try to gain control of those speakeasies so that they'll buy your whiskey instead of buying the competitor's whiskey. And then there's actually these cool little plastic trucks, and you put the crates of whiskey in the back of the truck, and then they go line up at the docks of these different speakeasies to sell their whiskey. And it's just, I think the theme probably does it for me more than anything. It's just such a cool theme. And I want to get this game to the table because I mean, I've probably only played a handful of times ever. But for whatever reason, in my mind, this is such a great game, and I just want to play it more and more. And I don't get the opportunity because, first of all, you probably got to have 3 to 5 players. A higher player count's probably better in this game. But also there's a little bit of a teach to it, and it takes a little, it's a couple hour game, so it's not a real light game that you can just get to the table. Plus, if you're introducing new people to games, this is, like I said, cutthroat, and you're beating the heck out of each other. It's not necessarily a family-friendly game. So the audience that I have is not as big for this game. But it's a super great game. If anybody wants to try a cutthroat game about making moonshine and, hauling your hooch to the speakeasies, come on down to Sidetracks and let me know, because I want to play some more Bootleggers. All right, my number 33 is a fantastic family game. It's dropped just a couple spots. It's basically around the same spot as it was last time on my list. But I gotta caveat it. It's a family game that can be a little bit cutthroat, and that's Survive Escape from Atlantis. This is an easy game to learn. Basically, you have a bunch of people on the island of Atlantis, and you're trying to get them off the island to safety before Atlantis sinks into the ocean, right? And so this game works great with 4. If you have 4 players, it's perfect. But you're trying to get your people on the lifeboats and get them to safety while other people are doing the same thing. Sounds pretty good, right? It's good family. It's good theme. It makes sense. The artwork's pretty, okay? But the cutthroat part is, on your turn, you get to move your people and try to get them to safety. But then you also roll a dice. And there are sharks and whales and sea monsters that you then get to move that you can use to attack the other players. And so if your opponent's players are in the boat and you take a whale and you ram their boat with the whale, it's going to knock all their people off into the ocean, and now they're swimming, right? And if they're swimming, then they're prey for the sharks. And so the next turn, maybe you roll the dice and the sharks go in and you eat their people, right? Or the sea monster goes in. If the sea monster goes in and hits their boat, not only does he capsize the boat, he eats the people too. And so it's what seems like a really fun family weight game is actually, it can be kind of mean at times. And so I try to caveat that when I'm introducing this to new people. It's an easy game to learn and it's super fun, but you got to be okay with people coming after you, because there is a mean streak to survive Escape from Atlantis. Number 32 on my list has risen 5 spots since last year, and this, I think, is my first cooperative game on the list. So for those that are unfamiliar, a cooperative game is one where instead of you and I competing against each other and trying to see who wins, you know, who scores the most points or who makes the most money or whatever, we're actually working together to try to beat the game. And so the game presents a challenge to us, and we have to do a certain series of things in order to beat the game and win. And usually there's 3 or 4 different ways you can lose and only one way to win. So a lot of these games are pretty easy to lose, especially when you're first learning and starting out. But most of these games also have ways where once you learn the game and you get better at it, you can ramp up the difficulty level. And so my first cooperative game that you'll see on my list is Forbidden Island. And the reason this one is probably first on my list, it's the simplest game. So there's not as much deep thought and deep strategy to it as some of the other games. But it's my entry point to cooperative games. It's the one that if people have never played a cooperative game, or maybe they're not even sure if they like games, and so they're reluctant to try something new, this is one where we could sit down and we play together because we're on a team. And so cooperative games too are great when you're playing with kids, and particularly younger kids, because you all sit and talk about your strategy as you're playing. Well, what if we do this? And what if we do this? Well, what if you do this and then I do this on my turn? And it helps unlock the logic. You know, it makes that logic visible. If I'm trying to beat you, I'm not going to tell you what's going on in my head and what I'm doing to try to beat you, like what the strategy options that I'm thinking through, right? But if I'm working with you and we're working together to try to beat this thing, I'm going to share everything I know and everything I'm thinking, right? And so this is a great way for kids to learn strategy and to learn that logic and sort of get them to be like, oh, I get it, right? And it's amazing how quickly they pick it up. The other thing I love about cooperative games, particularly for kids if they're kind of hyper competitive, or maybe they're having a trouble being a sore loser, right? Or not being a gracious winner. Cooperative games are great for that as well, because we all win together or we all lose together. And so I can show them what it's like. Oh man, we just lost that game, but we did so great. And you know, what if we would have done this? And you can help sort of, again, coach them through. It's okay to lose, you know, if you're not losing once in a while, you're not challenging yourself enough. Or, hey, we all won that. Man, we did great. You did this. And so it's a great way to just sort of model that behavior that you want from them in terms of being a gracious winner and not being a sore loser when you don't succeed. And so Forbidden Island is fantastic. And this game, to me, is the best value in board gaming. You can typically pick up this game for $15 or less. Comes in a beautiful tin, great artwork, great components. And so for bang for your buck wise, this is the best thing you're going to find on the market. All right, my number 31, the last one on this list, is a game that we've house ruled a little bit. It's been in our collection for a long time. It was about the same spot on my top 50 last year. I'm a sucker for train games. As you can see behind me, Sidetracks has sort of a train theme to it. And, you know, there are people out there who only play train games. I'm not that guy. I like all kinds of themes, but I am kind of a sucker for train games. and this game is called Empire Builder. Empire Builder is a super cool game because you actually draw connections. You draw railroads on the map. So it's a giant map with little dots, and you're basically drawing railroads to connect different cities. And there's a million reasons I love this game. One, if you're trying to teach kids geography, it's a great way to learn geography. And this is a pick up and deliver game. So, you know, I may be going out to Des Moines, Iowa and getting corn or pigs and then hauling them to the East Coast, or going to Minnesota to get iron ore and delivering that to Pittsburgh, and then getting steel in Pittsburgh and taking that to Detroit to make cars. And then I'm taking tourists from New York to Mexico or whatever. But basically you're picking up things in different parts of the country. Well, the items that are produced in those parts of the country are thematic. They go with, you know, rice is being produced in New Orleans, fruit is being produced in Tampa or Miami. And so kids can learn just sort of by osmosis the products and the goods that tend to be produced in different parts of the country, in addition to just starting to learn the map and understanding where Toronto is in relation to St. Louis and where St. Louis is in relation to Guadalajara. And you know, that part of it is really cool. The couple downsides to this game: one, it's long. You're probably talking 2-3 hours at least. So it can be a little long, and at times, if you get behind or you feel like you're not getting good cards, there are times when you can be like, man, this is a little bit of a drag because I feel like I got no chance here, and yet it still continues on. One of the things that we did in this game to change it up a little bit, there are yellow event cards that pop up in the deck every so often where bad things happen, like the railroad workers go on strike, or there's a hurricane in the Gulf, or there's a flood that wipes out your bridges, or it's just bad random stuff that happens. And it slows the game down because then you have to go back and rebuild things, or you may be halfway between New York and LA with a load and a tornado hits in Oklahoma and it says, oh, you lose your load. So I got to go all the way back to New York, get the load again, and go back to LA, right? And it just draws the game out. Plus, it's like really random. So if I get hit with 3 or 4 bad things just by happenstance, it kind of takes the strategy out of the game, because now, you know, this person won not necessarily because they had a better strategy and they played better, but just because they got lucky and none of the yellow cards hit them at the right, you know. So we've taken the yellow cards out completely. The other thing that we've done is we start the game with a faster train. So in the game, you start off with a train, and then you can upgrade your train as you go. We start automatically from the get-go with the faster train because it just gets you going quicker, and it just makes the game go a little bit faster. It's still sort of a long game, not that hard to learn. I love it because it's basically a logistics game. I'm thinking about, okay, I'm going to take this and pick it up here, and then on the way I'll pick up something here, and then I'll deliver this one, and then I'll pick this up and drop this off here. And so you're thinking about those route connections and combinations throughout the whole game. And I like that. I think it's kind of a cool puzzle. It is a little bit long, but I think Empire is a great game. Empire Builder is a great game, and it's something that I haven't seen really replicated in other games. So it does something unique, I think. And this is another game. I think they're coming out with a reprint of this game pretty soon. So sometimes you can find it at Ollie's or somewhere pretty cheap. But be on the lookout if that interests you. I think they're coming out with a reprint of this one, so you might be able to pick it up sometime soon. So that's my number 31, Empire Builder. So I hope you found something of interest to you on this list. If you did, and you're interested in trying any of these games out, we got them down here on the shelf at Sidetracks. Come by anytime. Be happy to teach them to you. We'll see you on the next video.